Good evening. My name is Ruud van Linden, visiting from Amsterdam, and I'll be here to talk to you about personalized manifests on the fly. So, a little bit about myself, because most of you don't know me. I'm a video geek, been so from high school, ripped VHS tapes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine and then uploaded them to my fan site, which is not completely legal, but back in 1999, Paramount didn't care. Um, previous, previously founded a company called Stream One, an OVP, small footprint Europe, and now founding a company called Infuse Video. And actually, we have a lot in common with what we're trying to do with a previous speaker. So there's the production part of things, and there's the distribution part of things, and they are very much separated. And that's what Infuse Video is about, creating dynamic video infrastructure that combines hosting, stitching, and rendering, creating a much more dynamic environment, basically. We are currently active in preventative healthcare, so medicine explainer videos for pharmacies. That is not exactly what most of you folks are active in, but it is, it's very important, and it's good. A good way to get started with this, because it doesn't matter if there's a couple dropped frames in an explainer video, or if there's an audio pop or that kind of stuff. But about personalized manifests at scale. So there's some use cases to do this. So versioning, localization, accessibility, inclusiveness. But what this talk isn't about is recommendations. So a lot of, when people in this industry talk about personalization, it'll be like, hey, you get your own thumbnails, or the most engaging thumbnail, or whatever, or recommendation or discovery will be better. But no, this is about actually showing a different video stream to a different viewer. And I'm going to talk about the why and about the challenges. So some reasons to do this. So if a viewer has photosensitive epilepsy on Netflix, you'll get a warning when you're watching Stranger Things, like, hey, there's flashing lights, but there's no way to really do something about it. But imagine if we could just show that person a personalized manifest in which a bunch of segments, are swapped out with a version that has a lower contrast or is otherwise edited so that it's not harmful anymore. The same could be true for scenes with a lot of blood, gore, like PG-13 versus R-rated content, or if there's lack of visual localization, so visual localization instead of forced narrative subtitles. I'll show a little bit of that later on. Yeah, and on the industry side, there are problems as well. Monetization is harder, churn is higher, user dissatisfaction is higher if you don't get content that's really made for you. And so, one quick example, John Wick, forced narrative subtitles, but burnt in, but done in such a way that it's actually, next level is how I captioned it, so that it actually adds something. So if you're deaf, if you're hard of hearing, this will actually add something for you. And currently, there's no real way to do this except for creating multiple versions for multiple regions. And there's a lot of stuff will go wrong with this. So this movie can be seen, there were problems with this movie on Netflix in some regions where there was no forced narrative replacement for this, and where these forced narrative subtitles were missing. So it doesn't always work. A quick other example, so Disney Pixar localized their content pretty intensively. So they do this for dozens of markets. So English versus French here. And it is not just about language. It's about more than that. It's also about culture. I think the next example is going to be like, okay, what happens if you've got like a set number of characters? But this one is about like Europe versus North America, where this is the scene for North America, this is the scene for Europe. Because this way it resonates more with the viewer. And Netflix has started doing some interesting things as well. So this scene has kind of forced narrative subtitles, kind of like the John Wick example that I showed earlier. But then the same captions in multiple languages, in this case English, Portuguese, and the original language of this show, Spanish. So another example, Taco Bell versus Pizza Hut. So you may or may not remember Demolition Man. In Europe, it did not have Taco Bell. It had Pizza Hut product placement. You could see it on the top. So the bottom one is the original North American version. You can see Taco Bell logos on the doors. It was just removed in the European version on the top. And this gave some other interesting problems where like the English captions in the UK would mention Taco Bell while the person, like in the movie, they were saying Pizza Hut. So there's, yeah, that's, you know how this kind of stuff happens, right? So another example, Iron Man. So in Iron Man 3, they just added a scene to the Chinese version. You can see a bunch of famous Chinese actors using, there's some kind of chocolate milk in the scene. And they just added this scene in China, and yeah, the doctor does some acupuncture on Tony Stark. And the next one is a pretty cool example. Flawless AI, I hope the audio is working. What this company, Flawless AI, does is they can dub and then change lip sync. It works on my... And by the way, I'll do it again, but then keep the microphone to my left. I didn't think of that.
Now we're stuck on this stupid tower in the middle of nowhere. And I don't blame you, and now we're stuck on this stupid freaking tower in the middle of freaking nowhere. And it's all my fault.
So this is the kind of stuff you could do with AI in the future, and not the stuff where we dream up beer or pizza commercials that kind of go out of hand for those who have seen it. But actually change something in a very structured way and then create an extra version of that. So imagine if you could go on Netflix or wherever you want to watch this movie and then toggle R-rated or PG-13. And what Netflix would do now, because of its internal strategy, is just you get like a completely different set of segments. But what we could do is just swap out the segments that are different. It's not super easy because of edge cases, but still, there are companies, there are organizations working on fixing that. So the BBC is working on creating object-based media or flexible media. It's really interesting. I highly suggest if you think this is interesting, you Google this, because the BBC has a whole lot of information, code examples, tools, all of this they've developed. And all of that is to create a personalized experience for the viewer. Also, the IBC Accelerator project that we're co-running is dealing with this. Say more about that later, but I'm probably already over time. And of course, we know there's commercial applications already like video ads, but that's usually just like 10,000 of almost the same files. Formats that we need for this, because just like the Dolby presentation, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've got IMF, so we can use IMF to define like, okay, this is different for this reason. And we can use segmented protocols and just swap out segments for streaming. Again, it's not that easy, but so this is what it would look like for IMF. So for example, you got like the English video, like the yellow bar. The epilepsy safe video would have a bunch of scenes that are replaced. Reduced gore would also have a bunch of scenes that are replaced. And once you translate that to segments, this is kind of what happens. And in the manifest, the standard manifest, quote unquote, you would show the yellow segments. In the epilepsy safe video, you would show the yellow ones, but you would replace those where applicable with the epilepsy safe red ones. So technical challenges. Well, yeah, there's a whole lot of those. Um, so we already have per shot transcoding. A couple of vendors already offer this, and that's kind of what we need for this. But we need to make segments interchangeable. That's easy if everything is exactly the same length, such as the movie clip that I just showed from the fall. But we also need metadata that knows what's what, and of course you need that from production. It needs to go all the way through the whole value chain, and then somehow in the UI or some other decisioning piece of software needs to decide what's what. So yeah, that's a challenge. So things that we found out that are also challenges is if PTS, DTS within HLS segments jump. Most clients are fine with it, but Android TV, like some other clients, will just stop playing or show black picture, those kinds of things. Other issues, if segments are not exactly the same length. So if you've got, like, you're replacing a 5-second segment with a 10-second segment, and there is background music, it's kind of complicated. Intersection segments are also a problem. So if I just swap out a scene, but that scene and the previous scene is in one segment, I need to have multiple versions of that segment that also contains the previous scene. Depending on how you deal with your metadata on the back end, that could be complicated. Discontinuities, like, don't help. That's one of the things we saw. We just tried to insert discontinuities. Clients don't seem to care too much, and yeah, weird device behavior is still a thing. So one of the things we're doing in the industry, together with Metarex, we are running a project called Responsive Narrative Factory. It's one of the IBC accelerator projects this year. And our goal is to set up a viewer experience that is customizable. So we just heard that the BBC is on board with this. They are donating content from their show Springwatch, which is kind of like the local version of Planet Earth for the UK. And you'll be able to configure things like, okay, I don't want to see predatory scenes. I don't want to see a bird of prey like snag a cute little fox or a mouse. And you'll be able to customize that show for your viewing, and that's what we're trying to do. And and in addition to that, so we're still looking for companies that are participating. Like some of you here I have talked to about this. It would be great if we have more companies joining this, because what we're doing is defining, like, okay, what do we want to do when it comes to customizable, personalized content? How do we want to standardize it? Do we want to use IMF to define this on the distribution side? How do we define this on the streaming side? Okay, because we can, like, use Python to create different manifest files, but we need more than that. And like, what's out there right now in this field that we don't know about just yet? And if you know, then please come find me. Let's chat about this, and we'd love to hear more. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for the interesting presentation. Maybe I missed something here. What's the difference between what you presented with dynamic ad insertion? So, like,
so the difference would be that we are creating the manifest from scratch. We're not just inserting an ad, but we are defining the content in a very foundational way. In some ways, it's very similar. In some ways, it's similar. But we're really doing this, like, throughout the asset. And it is an integral part of the asset. So it's not meant to replace an ad or insert an ad.
so yeah, if I understand it correctly, like, you know, the staging or splicing part are the same. So you guys have the additional capability to actually help generate the personalized fragments assets. Is that correct?
So what we're doing, what our product is doing, I think I caught all of that, but yeah. So what we're doing is we transcode everything through the same workflow, so we exactly know, like, what we output. So there's no not that kind of problem that you could sometimes run in with DAI or SSAI. Yeah, it's more about like, okay, how do we define like this foundational new way of defining content, and how do we go from taking that from the production stage at an authoring stage all the way through streaming. And yeah, there's a lot of similarities to SSAI tech, but it's also in a way different because it's about the content itself. It's not just about replacing something, but it's defining something from the get-go. Yeah.
What about the intent or the creative intent?
Yeah, so the thing about this creative intent is completely preserved because with what we're describing, the studio would have to create these multiple versions. So the examples that I showed with Netflix, with Pixar, Disney, those are already things that are completely 100% creative intent, as the creator has intended. And when it comes to Flawless, it's a studio that commissioned like these different versions of the Fall, the R-rated and the PG-13 version. And of course, somebody like Quentin Tarantino would never go for creating a PG-13 version of these movies, but a lot of studios can smell the dollars and would want to, because it increases their audience size.
Yeah, was that the question? Was artist intent? Was it around that? That was my question too. So it's either more streams, more dollars, or
all of this
preserving artist intent.
This is like about a new way of creating content. It's not about changing content afterwards. So in some cases, maybe the distributor would do that. That's how they roll. But yeah. All right.
Any final questions? All right, thank you again, Ruud.
Cool, thank you.